All right. Hello, everyone. We're just going to give it a little bit more time for a few people to trickle in, and then we're going to get started. I hope everyone's having a good, lovely afternoon. We're in. All right. All right, we're going to get started then. Thank you all for joining for this session. Really excited to be here. My name is Iris. I'm going to be your MC for today's session. And I'm an urban designer with Isthmus Group. Just a few elements around some admin for this Zoom meeting. So throughout the session, we will be running a poll, so feel free to contribute and answer as we go. If not, that's also fine. We will then maybe have a look at those polls at the end as part of a closing conversation. I also think we have a chat going that you can write some questions in, and if we have time at the end, we'll also have a look if we can answer some of those burning questions you might have. So that's kind of some of the admin from me. Really excited about this initiative, the Auckland Climate Festival, such a great opportunity to be a part of it, and we're all excited, Kāinga Ora, Isthmus and AUT, likewise, to be able to showcase some of the work and thinking we've had around the built environment. So I'm going to just get us started and give us a little bit of an overview of just who we are for those of you who don't know. Kāinga Ora obviously brings together a lot of people, capabilities, and resources of the Kiwi Build Unit Housing New Zealand and its development subsidiary HLC. They provide tenancy services to public housing tenants, home ownership products, and other services, while also delivering quality urban developments that connect homes with jobs, transport, open spaces, and the facilities that communities need. Then we've got Isthmus. We are an interdisciplinary design practice working to regenerate Aotearoa, New Zealand by connecting land, people, and culture. We're the master planners, architects, and landscape architects for many neighbourhoods within Kāinga Ora's Auckland Housing Programme. And then we've got Auckland University of Technology is among the top 1% of universities in the world, widely known for academic excellence. And together, well, Isthmus, AUT, and Kāinga Ora are partners on the research program, Te Hotonga Hapori, a 5-year research program studying how urban housing redevelopment affects people's well-being. So that's kind of just to give you an overview. Some of you might have already known this, but let me just close my chat. So next, I'll just introduce our speakers. So the team from Isthmus and my colleagues today here are Hayley Muir, Brad Ward, Ivy Lanera, and Ashley West. They have a mix of experience in landscape architecture, and urban design, and lead many of the neighborhood master planning projects within our studio. And they will be taking you through some of the design thinking that gets applied to the regeneration of Tamaki Makaurau's neighborhoods within the Auckland Housing Programme. And then we have joining us from Kāinga Ora is Andrea Duncan. Andrea has a background in architecture and has worked in sustainability-focused roles now for the past 10 years. And in her role at Kāinga Ora, she supports the development of sustainability strategy from within the Strategy, Finance, and Policy Group's Sustainability Directorate. And she will be speaking to us today about the sustainability measures that Kāinga Ora are implementing to look after our environment. And then last but not least, from AUT, Professor Scott Duncan. He's the director of Te Hotonga Hapori and head of the Behavioral Nutrition and Physical Activity Department in the School of Sport and Recreation at AUT. And his research centers on creating environments that allow people of all ages to live healthy and active lives. So Scott will then take us through the exciting research program that will help us learn the impact of these projects on the well-being of these communities. I might just do a small introduction on the Auckland Housing Programme for those who don't know it. So Kāinga Ora is one of the largest landowners in Auckland, and the Auckland Housing Programme is helping Tāmaki Makaurau really develop a vibrant city by delivering more quality homes at pace and at scale. So previously underutilized land in Northcote, Roskill, Mangere, and Oranga is being intensified to provide around 22,500 new state affordable and open market homes, approximately 3 times as many homes as the land currently occupies. So, but the Auckland Housing Programme is really about more than just numbers of homes. It's part of the most extensive urban regeneration ever undertaken in New Zealand. And it also provides really an important opportunity to improve and increase amenity, public space, and infrastructure to support and strengthen the communities as they grow. So the AHP, as it's called, is also creating more competition and innovation in the home and construction market by creating a significant pipeline of work for building companies. So that's quite a lot of information for me and enough talking for me. And I will kindly hand over to Hayley, my colleague from Isthmus, to take over.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks, Iris. Ko Hayley Muir tōku ingoa. It's my privilege to be kicking off Isthmus as part of today's presentation, where we'll be taking you through some of the aspects of our design approach to the regeneration of Tāmaki Makaurau's neighbourhoods. In these projects, we're seeing sustainability as well-being, or through a well-being lens. And this to us is about going further than maintaining things at a sustainable rate or level, and actually making sure that both the environment and the community really thrive and flourish so that their mauri is building and strengthening long into the future. And this is built on a philosophy that when our land is well, our people can be well. To begin with, we look at things in a variety of scales and across multiple layers. The scales we work with are city, neighbourhood, street and home, and interventions at each scale are interrelated and can contribute to the well-being of both planet and people across our entire region. Typically, we master plan at the neighbourhood level while being cognizant of the other scales. And the layers we consider are the environmental layer. This is our base. This is the living systems, our foundation and the beginning. And then we layer in our networks, and this might be our movement networks and open space networks. We look at the blocks created by our networks, and then the buildings and activities that fill these blocks. So Brad and Ivy will now talk you through some of the key elements within the environmental layer, before Ashley and I will touch on the importance of streets as more than just critical features of our movement network and the benefits of housing density within our blocks and buildings.
Thanks, Ellie. Kia ora koutou. Ko Brad Ward tōku ingoa. I just want to start off by asking a question, and particularly for those focused in or living in Tāmaki Makaurau. And the question is, how often do you visit one of the 30,000 kilometres of streams that we have in our region? The question relates around daily or weekly or monthly, occasionally. Do you take special day trips to those streams, or do you never visit the streams that are within our region? That's because today I want to talk about te wai, or water. All too often in our suburban and urban developments, we see streams and rivers and overland flow paths that have been relegated to the backs of properties, culverted, piped and removed. And I'd like to focus on what we've been doing to change this, what these assets can provide for the communities, and how a change in thinking can have a positive impact on climate change and well-being. By removing streams from the whenua, we've seen a reduction in flora, fauna, well-being and cultural values. The mauri of our neighbourhoods have been damaged, and climate change is only compounding this effect. We continue to see increased flooding within our communities, damaging homes and unusable recreational areas. All of this contributes to environmental, social and cultural degradation, and this will only continue to increase unless we do something. In partnership with mana whenua Kaitiaki, Iki Panuku, local community organisations and Kāinga Ora, we are seeking to reimagine what water can mean within the Northcote development. Like many neighbourhoods, Northcote streams have been removed and piped underground with little acknowledgement. However, Northcote is characterised by the physical presence of a puna, or natural spring, that flows from Jesse Tona Scout Reserve through the neighbourhood. Our project, called Tiara Greenway, looks to create a 1.5 kilometre new green corridor that provides an opportunity to open and daylight this stream. Connected spaces will provide an opportunity for green and ecological corridor that provides habitat, passage, and food sources for people, birds, fish, and wildlife. A catchment stormwater management approach provides the best outcome for a water-sensitive design response to the hydrology, reducing flooding, ecology, safety, and management of overland flow paths throughout the neighbourhood. We consider in our neighbourhoods the environmental layer is more than just fauna and flora. It also needs to encapsulate the well-being of a community to enable a conscious focus on having a positive effect on climate change. And for the Tiara Awataha Greenway, it was defined in partnership with mana whenua as the 3 strands of landscape and community. AUT explains or explores the natural environment and the stories of the landscape. The whenua and the wai speak to each other. The Awataha stream corridor is a visible, green, resilient, and ecologically healthy space. Ahutangata is the 2nd strand, and it talks about creating a connected, healthy, and inclusive community supported by a healthy habitat. This enables safe journeys, opportunities for growing with nature, playing, learning, and coming together as a community. And the 3rd strand is ahutoi, which is the cultural layer that comes from weaving the strands of the natural and social environment together in a way that is unique and beneficial to Northcote. In the story of place, the Greenway invites people to grow, live, and move with nature. It celebrates both a healthy, resilient natural environment and a healthy, resilient community. This enables the community to have ownership, visibility, and focus on the natural environment, which will in turn reduce flooding, improve community well-being, fauna and flora, and restore the mauri of the site. I'll now pass you on to Ivy.
We're having some trouble locating
Yes, sorry.
Ivy.
Give us 1 second. There we go.
Thanks, Iris. Thanks, Brad. Apologies, couldn't unmute myself there. Kia ora koutou, ko Ivy Anera, tōku ingoa. Similar to Brad, I suppose I'd like to start off with a question as well about what is most important to you about the trees in your neighborhood. This is because I will be talking about urban ngāhere today and the work that we are currently developing with Kāinga Ora to ensure that this environmental layer is carefully considered across the AHP neighborhoods. So firstly, what is urban ngāhere? So urban ngāhere or urban forest is this complex network of trees and vegetation, native and exotic, that we see in our backyards, gardens, streets, parks and reserves, waterways. It brings animals, insects, people, and even the built environment all together. And it also carries the interconnected whakapapa or genealogy of our identities and places. In fact, in many cities around the world, urban ngāhere are the most extensive, functional, and visible form of green infrastructure. And there has been so many research that has been done in the benefits of urban ngāhere to our health and well-being, enhancement of our land and waters, reduction of air, soil, water pollution, carbon sequestration, prevention of urban heat island effect, and creation of livable neighborhoods. So according to Auckland Council's 2013 data, Tamaki Makoto's urban areas has just over 18% canopy cover, and majority of these are located on privately owned land, about 61%, whilst the remaining 39% are on public land. And so Auckland Council have recently set a target to increase Tamaki Makoto's average canopy cover to 30% by 2050, and the AHP has a critical role to play in achieving this target. So to ensure that protection and enhancement of existing urban ngāhere are prioritized in the regeneration of the AHP neighborhoods, we are currently developing an urban ngāhere strategy or guidelines at the neighborhood level in consultation with local communities, mana whenua, local schools, the local boards, Auckland Council, and other organizations. And this strategy really aims to provide guidance in the treatment of existing trees and new trees and vegetation within AHP neighborhoods. And some of the outcomes that we are hoping to achieve are prioritizing retention of existing trees within original location, and so really incorporating them into the designs of superlots. If this can't be achieved, we look at opportunities to transplant existing trees to the public realm or schools. So the images on screen right now are 2 recent examples of existing trees that have been transplanted from Kāinga Ora sites to their nearby local schools and parks. Another example is one of the local communities that we are working with has established a community food forest, and we are supporting them by transplanting fruit trees from Kāinga Ora sites to the food forest. When trees couldn't be retained due to their health, size, or remaining life, we aim to look for other opportunities on how we can still integrate them back into the neighborhood, and such as potential propagation of trees and really getting the local community to be involved in this whole process, or also encourage reuse of timber from removed trees for creation of play equipment, or reusing them as mulch for new planting areas. We also look at opportunities for sourcing new trees and vegetations from or through nurseries being run by local communities to support local livelihoods. So really building these relationships to hopefully create a network of people that will champion the protection and enhancement of our urban ngāhere. And lastly, ensuring that we maximize areas for planting within the neighborhoods, especially in the public realm, such as our streets, making these places greener and for people. So just to sum it up, I think it is important to acknowledge that even though our urban ngāhere has its own mauri or life force, in order for it to continuously thrive and support us, it also requires our constant care and efforts. And this is really what we're trying to push for in the designs of regeneration of the AHP neighborhoods. Kia ora. So back to you, Hayley.
Thanks. Streets are a critical part of the neighbourhood's movement network, and our master plans consider movement requirements like pedestrian desire lines, improved access to public transport, and increased permeability for walking and cycling. But the streetscape itself is about more than just getting from place to place. We're trying to improve well-being for both people and planet by making sure streets are interesting places to sit, meet and play, places with variety, quirk and diversity, an environment that enables community identity, livability, and community connectedness, with neighbours getting to know each other, healthy street trees, treatment of our stormwater runoff, and children experiencing independent mobility. We think this is key. Thinking of the streetscape as more than the road reserve, it includes the public and private realms and the interfaces between the two, from building facade to building facade, including private yards, balconies, front entrance paths and fences, footpaths and street planting, all of it integrated to deliver a warm, inviting and safe feeling street environment. Our neighbourhood master plans include streets that are retrofitted to provide for new homes amongst existing ones, new streets to service new homes and to break down block sizes to improve neighbourhood permeability. And in some cases, special feature streets are designed with overwidth footpaths and enhanced landscape amenity as part of a key walking route to school or other community facility.
Cool, thanks Hayley. Kia ora, I'm Ashley and I'll be talking about optimising how we can use our land and some of the benefits around density. A big part of the Auckland Housing Programme is to optimise land that is currently underutilised and essentially provide more warm, dry, healthy homes for more people. When we do use our land efficiently, it has a nice knock-on effect in almost every direction, which in turn benefits both the planet through more sustainable use of our resources and the people in various areas of both physical and social well-being. At a small scale, it's about maximising space and reducing unused space. It's about understanding the site's context and what is appropriate, ensuring there is sufficient access to public transport, parks, schools, and shopping centres, and that when we have more homes, we appropriately balance that with adequate amenity. So what are we doing to be more efficient? First, it's important that we create the framework to support success. We call this the master plan. In order for a master plan to be successful though, we work with a team of people to understand as much as we can from every angle in order to put in place a series of key moves to drive design decisions and ensure any development is aligned with the overall vision for the area. When increasing in density, it is critical that everyone is working to the same plan. The unitary plan is a great starting point for this, but a master plan is another layer of analysis which tests these decisions while looking for opportunity to improve land efficiency, access, and amenity. Another thing we do is make sure we have plenty of diverse typologies, which allows us to achieve a diverse community. This is an approach that is set out in the master plan to ensure that we have an appropriate variety of apartments versus low-rise homes and smaller versus larger bedroom homes. Having a good variety like this helps to support the growth of a diverse community. And lastly, a couple of examples to explain how we are achieving density and the kinds of opportunities that open up for us when we do. As you can see, both of these sites increase in density significantly. In example 1, we've gone from 6 standalone homes to 40, a mixture of terrace housing and 3-story apartments. Depending on how much land Kāinga Ora own, we are also able to look at things like realigning a road to be more efficient and have homes front public spaces like parks, creating a safer, more activated environment. In example 2, again, we've gone from 6 standalone homes to 15, a mixture this time of standalone, duplex, and terraces. In this situation, there is actually an existing narrow pedestrian link leading to the school. So here we have the opportunity to improve the visibility for kids by widening this access point and positively addressing the laneways. The goal here is to be smarter about how we're using our land. We need to be intentional about what we are doing and why, and understand that when we use land efficiently, that doesn't just mean a high yielding site. It also means creating new communities, new amenity, warm, dry, healthy homes, improved access, and better transport. It means we get to directly affect people's mental and physical well-being, and of course, keep the planet pretty happy. Thanks, and we'll go back to Hayley.
Thanks, guys. Before handing over to Andrea, I'll just touch quickly on some of those poll results, which are awesome. Thanks everyone for engaging.
Yeah,
so
really.
Yeah, when
I'm happy to. I can share those results with everyone, so we can just quickly run through them. I think everyone should be able to see this now on their screen.
Cool.
So this was the first question.
What I've taken from it is that 2/3 of us interact with our neighbours every day or once a week, which is pretty cool. When it comes to our streams, 1/3 of us are visiting one as a special day trip, but on our sort of day-to-day use of interaction with them, over half of us are walking to visit, so that's cool. Makes me think everyone's engaging with their local environment, which is nice to see. 75% or more than 75% are valuing our trees for the habitat provision that they provide, which is cool. And almost the same amount of people are also saying that they help the neighbourhood feel leafy and green. Nobody said they didn't notice or care about trees, which is awesome. Thank you. Over half the audience currently live in a detached house, but almost 1/3 of you can imagine living in a terrace, which is pretty cool. And when it comes to apartments, more people can imagine living in one with a lift than one that's more of a walk-up typology. So thanks, guys. That's really interesting to see. I'll let Andrea talk to you now.
Kia ora everyone, ko Andrea Duncan I'll just move the slides here. There we go, oops. Sorry, I'm just going to get used to controls. Kia ora everyone, so I'm Andrea and I'm Senior Advisor Sustainability with Kāinga Ora. So I'm just going to provide a little bit more of an introduction to Kāinga Ora and the scale of what we're trying to do. And also talk specifically to some of the sustainability initiatives that we're looking to roll out across our different activities. So first and foremost, our role is as a landlord. So we're landlord to just under 190,000 of the most economically and socially vulnerable New Zealanders. So they're often coming out to us as a last resort and often in very challenging circumstances. And so compared to the general population, they're more likely to be Mauri and Pacifica, single parents, and actually our largest demographic is children. But also, of course, everyday people like you and me, and you know, they have aspirations, they have fears, and mostly they want to live purposeful lives. So we do like to make sure that we keep our customers at the focus of what we do, and making sure that the work that we do is looking out for the well-being of our customers. And one thing that is really interesting about us as an organisation is we are underpinned by the Kāinga Ora Act, which was written up as we were established in late 2018. And it has some really broad outcomes written up in that act. So essentially we're legislated to address the environment and customer well-being. So that drives a lot of what we do. Sorry, it's not very responsive. Sorry, it's a little bit unresponsive. So we do have a really significant urban redevelopment program underway. And generally we are intensifying areas where we own a lot of housing. And so the Isthmus team have really kind of talked through these areas a little bit. So we have 7 large-scale brownfield development areas that will be producing over 40,000 homes in the next 15 to 20 years. So 6 of those are located within Auckland, and then there's the Porirua development in Wellington. And it's not just within Auckland that we are operating. We do have regeneration activities around the country. Sorry, I'm just having trouble controlling the slides actually. There we go, sorry, getting it. So we do have a lot of other regeneration activities that are taking place around the country. So all in all, our residential activity, construction activities actually represent about 7% of the residential construction that's going on in New Zealand at the moment. And, you know, so we've got a really significant role to play in making sure that we are doing this right. And it's not just new homes that we are needing to build. We actually are coming to the end of life for a majority of our housing. So if you imagine the kind of era of a lot of state housing that you'll know around you, a lot of it's coming to end of life. So part of the significance of the scale of build program that we're needing to do is actually to renew these houses. So either completely refurbish or actually replace them completely. So while we're aiming to do what is a really significant redevelopment program, of course, there's a lot of challenges just with the scale of what we're trying to do, but of course there is the massive challenge of actually addressing the issues that we're facing with climate change. And, you know, being responsible for such a large-scale construction program and urban development activities, we do have a real responsibility to make sure that we're reducing our impacts, not just reducing them, you know, transitioning into that being regenerative and restorative. But we also need to remember that a lot of some of these climate change impacts are inevitable at this point. And so we also, while we try to reduce our impacts, we also need to make sure that we're being resilient to the effects of climate change. And when we talk about this, we don't just mean in relation to our assets as an asset owner, but of course there's those customers to remember how are they going to be impacted by the changes coming our way. And we need to make sure that we are addressing their health and well-being as we go. So what are we doing at Kāinga Ora? So we do have a sustainability program set up that essentially has several different initiatives kind of that fall under these 4 kind of themes. And this is across all of our different scales of activity. So urban development activities, housing activities, etc. So I'll talk a little bit more to some examples of the work we're doing in each of these areas. So first off, mitigating climate change. So that's how do we reduce the emissions impact of this really significant construction program that we have underway? How do we reduce the impacts of our infrastructure developments? But also we need to be cognizant of the fact that as we undertake these urban development activities, we are potentially enabling a lot of, for example, transport emissions as we go. So taking those into consideration as well. Enhancing nature. So the team at Isthmus talked to this quite a bit. You know, we have some really amazing work which is happening around urban ngāhere across some of the development areas and also water quality. So, you know, with particularly the large scale brownfield developments that we're doing, they I think all or most of them have these streams that run through them, around them, you know, so we need to make sure that we are restoring the mauri of those waterways. Using resources efficiently is of course important given the scale of what we're doing, avoiding waste, making sure that we're using water efficiently and also energy. And then as I mentioned, adapting to climate change, making sure that we are aware of what the potential impacts are both to assets and customers. So I'll just talk a little bit more around what we're doing in some of these areas. So first off, one of the programs that we've got underway is around carbon neutral housing. And we're getting some really good momentum in this program. So its focus areas are on, so we're essentially looking to reduce the carbon impacts of both our housing portfolio that exists already, but also the new build program and future emissions that we're looking in through those developments. So reducing operational energy is really important. This is the largest component of a building's emissions impact. And by reducing operational energy, we need to make sure while we do that, that we're improving the occupant comfort, health and well-being. So a real issue for our customers is around fuel poverty. So even if we put in a really efficient heat source like a heat pump, they may never switch it on because they're very aware of the costs of electricity. So by improving the carbon performance of our homes, it has the co-benefit of addressing some of those issues. There's also embodied carbon. So that's essentially all of the emissions and impacts that are associated with the manufacturing of materials, transportation, essentially all of the construction activity. So those are all the kind of focus areas for that program. And how we're going about some of the activities within this program, it's a kind of iterative process. So we need to understand what's current status quo, what's the impact of that, and then testing out and investigating some alternatives. How do we build things better? What does a low carbon home look like? What does low carbon construction look like? And then ultimately we'll be wanting to monitor and evaluate the outcomes. So do we actually get better health and well-being outcomes? How do these homes perform? And that's where it's really important, where we do partner with the likes of research institutions such as AUT, to start to understand how our urban development areas and housing is performing. And ultimately, we want to be reinventing, how do we continually improve the status quo? And of course, given the urgency of climate change, we do need to pick up the quick wins wherever we can and implement those as we go. And also being a government agency, we really see that we play a key role in sharing what we're doing externally so that we can assist the sector more broadly to transition. So we've got some really exciting projects that are underway, so kind of pilot and innovation projects. So this is one of them. So Verde Ventura is one of our kind of 3-level walk-up developments in Māngere. That's targeting passive house, so that's essentially very efficient thermal performance, as well as 8 home star rating. So that kind of looks at the broader sustainability impacts of the construction. So this is not the only one. We've got lots of projects like this, and actually one to keep an eye out for. So it was just announced in the last couple of days, I think, that one of our projects, Kāinga Ora 5 systems, has actually been selected to be showcased at COP26 as part of the virtual building pavilion. So keep a lookout for that one. It's one of only 17 projects internationally that has been selected to be showcased. And it's essentially a project where we look at 5 different construction systems and ways of building. And essentially, we're essentially looking to how can we build homes of 2030, but now what does that actually look like, and testing the buildability, feasibility, cost, etc. as we go, so that we can share those lessons as we go. So as I mentioned, we've got a few projects on the go, and we work in with, we refer to this as the carbon continuum. So there's a lot of change going on in the building sector, or proposed changes. So MB has a Building for Climate Change program, which is looking at implementing some carbon caps for new buildings over the coming years. And so a lot of what these projects are doing is actually testing out how do we build to those performance targets. And so we've got a few projects which are kind of targeting different performance levels along that continuum. Some of you may be aware too that we have adopted the New Zealand Green Building Council's home star rating. So we require a 6 home star rating across all of our developments currently. And this has been a really good way of operationalising sustainability within our delivery process. And it provides a great stepping stone for us to incrementally increase the levels of performance across all of our developments. So that's what that continuum along the bottom line is, along the bottom there is. And so I guess the next big challenge is how do we take these projects that are really pushing the envelope, pushing the boundary of what can be done, and how do we roll that out across the portfolio, across the construction program? So we've started having a look at what the impact of our future portfolio and future construction pipeline looks like, so that we can start to understand when we make decisions to reduce the carbon impact of our developments, what does that look like across the next decades through to 2050. So the graph on the top left, the purple bars are the embodied carbon impacts of our construction program. So you'll see that we've got quite a significant construction program over the next few years that then kind of tapers off. And then the blue is the operational carbon, which is essentially the energy use of our housing portfolio. So even with New Zealand's grid decarbonising, it still is actually the biggest impact associated with our housing over its lifetime. And then on the right is just some examples of how we're going to be able to use this model to look at what impact certain decisions will have on our overall emissions profile. So one of the focuses is, of course, on making our buildings really thermally efficient, and that's, so that it requires minimal energy to heat and cool. But that's not the only use of electricity in our homes. Of course, there's hot water heating, there's appliance and plug loads, etc. And electricity demand is set to increase by about 68% by 2050. So we've got population increase, we've got electrification of transport, etc. And so district renewable energy systems are forecast to be a part of our decarbonising solution. And Kāinga Ora has some funding from government, essentially to trial some renewable energy technologies for public housing. So this is our decentralised energy program. So what we're looking to do is to essentially kind of test out different options and solutions. So, what's the best, what are the costs, what are the benefits, what are the design options for these distributed energy systems at a kind of household and community level. And then one of the really important outcomes for us is, again, the ability to reduce the energy costs for our customers. And how does that look like? What does that look like? And does that result in improved health and wellbeing outcomes now that there's less financial stress on our customers? So we do have a suite of trials that are planned to run over the 4-year funding period. And these are essentially testing integration of renewables on different types of housing stock, so including new developments and existing duplex standalone apartments, etc. And the first trial for this is being rolled out on retrofitted and new homes in the Wellington region. So again, looking at using resources efficiently. So I talked about the significance of our construction program, and so there's potentially significant implications on waste. So construction demolition waste in New Zealand accounts for around 50% of all waste to landfills. And as I mentioned, around 85% of our existing state housing portfolio is nearing the end of its life. So that's about 50,000 houses. And in addition to that, we're building all these new houses. So there's potential for a lot of construction waste associated with that, and also with the developments that we enable that are delivered by others as well. So we do have a program around, so we've set some demolition waste diversion targets, so 80% for Auckland, and we're looking at rolling out some targets regionally as well. We've set up a national site clearance panel. And so we're looking to really switch the hierarchy so that we're focused on reusing and relocating houses wherever we can. So we have a target around that. If that's not possible, then deconstruction, and as a last resort, demolition with diversion rates, diversion targets. In terms of new construction, so the Homestar rating does look at waste diversion and includes waste diversion targets. So we have that in play at the moment. And the other thing we've done is we have enabled improved data collection so that on our demolition sites to start with, but we'll roll this out across new construction as well, we're able to actually track and manage the waste that we are producing. So we're looking to kind of leverage the scale of what we're doing, to help solve what is really a very broad, wide system issue that we have with waste. The Isthmus team already talked quite a bit to some of the work that's going on with urban ngāhere. So Kāinga Ora has a really key role that we can play in this. We're not, it can't just be a solution on our own land, but how do we partner with others to get really good outcomes for our urban areas in terms of restoring urban ngāhere. So we have set up a kind of a lead role within the organisation to start to really push this forward even more. And So part of the work program will include looking at what we're doing. What are we doing on our own development sites? What policies and guidelines do we have in play, and what could we be doing more for ourselves? We'll also be looking at a demonstration project in one of our large scale areas that we can hopefully learn from, and also developing those strategic partnerships to really push that forward. And lastly, the fourth kind of focus area, climate adaptation. This year actually is the first year that in Kāinga Ora's annual reports, we will be publishing our first climate risk disclosure, and so soon to be published, I believe. And this is actually something that the New Zealand government took reasonable leadership on, requiring mandatory disclosure of climate-related risks for financial firms and listed entities. So Kāinga Ora bonds are actually listed publicly, which means that we're subject to these mandatory requirements. So as well as kind of reporting on that climate risk, we have initiated a work program to try and understand the risk, the climate risk to our assets and therefore to our customers. So this is just kind of an indicative example of, you know, how we expect these risks to change and increase over time. So we have started looking at, you know, what does flooding risk look like to our portfolio? What does it look like today? What does it look like in 2050, 2080, 2100? And so we will be looking to address climate risk, both with our existing assets and also as we undertake these urban redevelopment activities. How are we going to manage that risk going forward? And that's both from a physical assets perspective and also what does that mean for our customers so that they're not going to be unduly affected. So that was a bit of a whirlwind tour of some of the activities that we are undertaking at Kāinga Ora across those areas. So there's some amazing work that we're doing in partnership with the likes of Isthmus and other consultancies that are helping us to move this forward as well. So I will be handing over now to Scott Duncan, I believe, who will be talking to some of the research that AUT will be looking to do around wellbeing outcomes.
Thank you, Andrea. Just as you set up, Scott, if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. They will come directly to us in the back end. So do feel free to do so if you have a burning question. And Scott, over to you.
Right, thank you very much. Kia ora tātou. Scott Duncan, taku ingoa. I'm a professor of population health at AUT University. I'm also the director of Te Hotonga Hapori, which is a 5-year research program that started late last year. And to put a bit of a context, I guess, around why I'm in front of you today, we've been in discussions with Isthmus and with Kāinga Ora, who are formerly Housing New Zealand and HLC, around the true impact of these major urban redevelopments that are happening more and more so across the country. Previously, we've done a lot of work in the built environment and how that impacts on people's activity and health. And we've done that usually at a one-time point sort of way, a cross-sectional sort of way, because it's very hard to monitor changes in these sort of things over time. But one thing we did notice when we noticed, especially around Northcote at the time, which was just starting about 3 or 4 years ago, and that's right on the back doorstep of one of our campuses, we realized that actually it's quite an opportunity here to see if there is any impact going on here. Well, we know there is, but what sort of impact is going on in a natural experiment. And so we put together a bid to attach quite a comprehensive research program to some of these developments. And luckily, we were funded late last year by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment as part of your Endeavour Fund. So while this particular program is a 5-year program, we're hoping it will continue much longer than that because these are very long-term developments and they'll have long-term impacts on the communities that are facing them. So what I might do is I realize this will be quite a lot of information given to you quite quickly. So I just want to front end this by saying, if there is anything in particular that piques your fancy or piques your interest, please feel free to get in touch with me afterwards or to post a question, because we can always delve into something a bit more than what I'm covering in this particular presentation. I'd like to acknowledge our partners too, of course, in this. Isthmus, who have been with us from the start, but also brands who have come on board with one of the projects that are embedded within this program, and of course, Kāinga Ora, who are a big part of this project as well. We also have partners from other universities and a big group of us within the program, Te Hotonga Hapori. So these are the 5 different projects at this point which sit within the program. Program being, I guess, a broader body of research that involves individual projects. There are additional projects, as there are quite a few PhD students now attached to this program, about 7 or 8 now I think we have, so there will be other smaller projects going on as well, but these are the 5 main ones, which I'll just touch on today. And I'll go through these in order, but again, there may be certain aspects of each of these that you may find particularly interesting or not. So the first thing we're going to do before we even go in there and start trying to measure things is we're really interested in well-being, health and well-being, and how this is impacted by these major developments. We need to understand what that means for people who are going through this. So the first aspect that we're actually going to focus on is qualitative, which means we're going to go in and we're going to partner with some participants who are involved in these redevelopments, who are in the communities, and discuss with them their historical realities of that community, the intergenerational histories of those communities, and try and get an understanding of what those communities mean to the people in them. With this, we'll not only sort of start from a context that we actually understand the people that we're going to be working with, but also it will help us to frame what we mean by well-being, because well-being is a very tricky thing to define. We've been spending probably the past 8 or 9 months trying to do that, taking longer than we thought, but that's because it means different things to different people. And so what we're going to do is allow, I guess, the people to have a voice in that space. So when we do measure things, measure stuff, I guess, that'll be something that's of meaning to the people we're actually measuring it from. There'll also be an advocacy component to that as well. So we'll have a smartphone app, which allows people to take photos of the neighborhood and have voice recorders of things that they like and didn't like. There'll be some aspirational discussion about what they'd like to see in the future neighborhoods, how they like things to develop over the course of these developments. And so there'll be areas in Auckland that we specifically target that are going through these processes. And this will happen organically over the next 3 or 4 years. So with that in mind, we also have a more quantitative aspect of the program, and that is to look at people's personal well-being in time and space. It does sound quite sci-fi, but it actually means what happens when people move through space and have different time use patterns. What happens to their well-being, and how is it impacted when we change the space around them? So we do this, we're doing this in Auckland. I did have a bit of a slide there which had the areas that we're going to target in Auckland, but I thought that might be jumping the gun a little bit. So I pulled back and just gave you a bland Auckland map there. But there will be some certain areas in Auckland that we target that are undergoing urban redevelopment over the next 10 to 15 years. Some of them have started, some of them haven't. And so what we're hoping to do in those regions is be able to collect information from them that acts as a baseline, I guess, before too much development happens. And I guess that's quite the time-sensitive component of this program. We want to make sure we know what it's like to live in prior to these major developments, so that we can track things afterwards. And we'll also have a control group of participants that aren't in areas that are being developed, so we can compare as things happen over time. And this is probably the most complex project, this particular one. So there's 4 main components of it. We have a wellbeing interview, which is out for consultation at the moment. It's just been crafted. Again, that took 2 or 3 months of consultation and workshopping to try and map a wellbeing survey that's not too long, but also touches onto some key frameworks that the government's put out there and other organisations. So that'll be done in a face-to-face way with a sample of participants. I think around 1,500 participants in these regions. We're also into motion centres. So our group has quite a long history of measuring physical activity. And so we like to see how active people are, how well they sleep, how much sitting they do and how much time they spend in their car, those sorts of things. We call it behavioural time use. And it's quite an emerging area in health research, but it's really more about how people spend their time and how can we improve that and how does that improve their well-being. We're going to be asking people to wear little GPS receivers too, so we can see where they go in the neighbourhood. And we can see how much they use their parks, how they travel to work, how they get to school, all these sort of neighbourhood interaction components, and very aware that there's a bit of a Big Brother vibe to that particular methodology, but it is very anonymous. So we do go through jump through quite a few hoops to make sure that people feel that they're safe in that space. It's also an optional component of the work, obviously. And then one of the things I think is probably one of the most exciting things is the wellbeing app that we're developing, and that's in the final stages of development. And that will allow us to move beyond what we call evaluative wellbeing, which is at the top there, which is, I guess, your sort of overall satisfaction with life, to what we call experience wellbeing. So this is the short-term feelings of happiness, anxiety, stress, excitement, things that happen during a day when you're accessing certain parts of your neighbourhood that normally you can't really measure, you can't get at. But with a smartphone app, which is developed specifically for that purpose, we can do that. We can actually ask people to, in a given point in time, how are you feeling right now? And who are you with and what are you doing? So with that, we can actually get a really good high resolution look at how various aspects of behavioural of neighbourhood change affect well-being. So that's project 2. Project 3 builds on from that and by using the same sample 3 months later. Actually, sorry, I have get to the right one. Oh, I had some more information here about these particularly these parts. That's got quite a cool little figure there, by the way. That's example of the sort of things we can do with this information. That's an accelerometer someone's wearing on their wrist. And what we can do is we can map exactly what they're doing in a 24-hour period and give that to them. So people can actually see, oh, geez, that Saturday night I stayed up really late and it really slammed me for Sunday. So we can actually talk to people and show them what they do in a day objectively and use that to hopefully improve behavior. Doesn't always work, of course. And there's an example of a GPS map. So that's the sort of thing we're looking at. We look at hot spots of where people go a lot, how active they are at certain spots, because of course we can marry up the accelerometry with GPS, but that's an example of the sort of information we get. But I'm gonna skip forward to the next one, project 3. So this is taking, as I said, work with the same sample that we had in project 2, but with a more of a focus on the home environment, so the build of the home itself. And this is where Brands comes in. So Brands had some funding through a colleague of ours, Michael Nuth, who is interested in looking at wellbeing in the context of the home. And so we saw a real synergy between our work and his work. So we've brought them together. And so I'll be using a very similar app, looking at how people, especially when they move into new homes, how they interact with their homes. And the 4th project goes a little bit wider. So this is Kāinga Ora tenants. Previous projects for all tenants, all residents in a certain region. This is for Kāinga Ora tenants, and we want to do a nationwide wellbeing survey on all Kāinga Ora tenants. So this is using the same survey we were implementing in project 2, but slightly. There is an option for a hard copy as well, but we imagine most will be doing online versions. And so what we're interested in here isn't just about redevelopment, but it's also about various stages of relocation, for example, and what happens to well-being when Kāinga Ora tenants are moved from one spot to another, often without a say in where they're going. So it's really interesting for us to follow this and to make sure that people's well-being is being evaluated. This will happen again annually for 3 years. And I should mention, I guess, what we've done with our wellbeing framework and our measurement of wellbeing is fit into, in the first instance, the Living Standards framework. So this is the government's efforts to try and put some sort of formality behind what they mean by wellbeing. We know that the government is very interested in measuring population wellbeing and almost using that as a replacement for GDP as an indicator of national success, I guess. And so these are some of the things we'll look at in terms of, admittedly, a fairly Western view of wellbeing. But we're also looking at other models of wellbeing. For example, there's a really cool model of Maori model of wellbeing with Independent Mauri Statutory Board, which takes into account more than just the individual wellbeing. It's more collective, and it's also more environmental. So we're actually more interested, or also interested, in the wellbeing of the environment and the place, rather than just the humanistic view of wellbeing. So we're hoping to build this into a survey, which again is a pretty challenging thing to do, but a lot of this will also hopefully be captured with our qualitative work. And then finally, our last project is based in what we call the integrated data infrastructure, which is essentially Statistics New Zealand's portal to access all information that the government has on people. So you can do this anonymously, and you can look at different regions, look at very high-level indicators of what we might call population well-being and how they're tracking over time in areas that are being redeveloped and those that aren't. So this is probably the broadest, I guess, view of well-being, but also the shallowest. Because of course there is limitations in how much you can really understand well-being from government data, but nonetheless this is the step that will allow us to go back as far as 2007 all the way up to 2025. I'm very aware I'm running down low of time, so I'm just going to wrap that up. But what I will do is just leave those details up there for a couple of seconds. So if there is any information, again, apologies for the speed in which I flew through that. But if there is any questions or you would like more information about the project, I'd love to have a link to a website to put up there for you right now, but unfortunately it's about a couple of weeks away from being public. But there will be a website where we can actually put some of this information up, and also when we have data, which will start being collected next year, we can actually give you some feedback. There's a poll there as well about the sort of way, if you're interested in this and you want to know more about it, especially about the results when they come to hand, what would be the most effective way of engaging with you in that space? Is it social media? Is it email? Is it website? I'd be really appreciated if you just give us your feedback on that. But again, thank you very much for listening and for allowing us to be part of this corridor.
Thank you, Scott. what a great and interesting presentation. We have just a couple questions that we might just address, mainly one for Andrea, if you wouldn't mind. We had a question around your comment about Kāinga Ora information sharing to improve the industry. Will that extend to publicly sharing approved building consent drawings for others to copy?
Yeah, and I'd say I probably don't have the answer exactly at the moment, but one of the things that we will certainly be doing as we kind of develop up all of these build solutions is we're working very closely with the likes of brands and MB. And so in the publication, I probably can't say exactly whether we're going to publish everything completely publicly, but we'd certainly be working with the likes of brands, to make where we can share things. The other thing that we're looking at, we're trying to, look at how we go about measuring carbon within our build program. And as we go, we're constantly having these conversations about, is this something that, industry could use more broadly? And there's certainly, as I say, there's a really exciting project, the 5 Systems project, that there will likely be a lot of publicity around given its selection for COP26. And we will be putting up things like case studies, that type of thing. In terms of the actual details of the buildings, I'm probably not quite the right person to answer that. I'm not exactly sure yet what we will be able to share or not.
Great. There weren't any, I think we're gonna have to call it now. Any other last words, Hayley, Scott, or Andrea? Thank you so much to everyone for joining and presenting. A little shout out to Michelle Kennedy, the founder of the Auckland Climate Festival, for allowing us to give us this platform to share kind of what we've been up to. So thank you, Michelle. And yeah, thanks to all our speakers, colleagues of mine, and Scott and Andrea again. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Iris.
Bye.